Hi everyone, I'm Enrico Marani from NIMS. This is the event Electrifying the Automotive Industry with Julian and Fieres. So this event, it's the outcome of the collaboration of AITB, NIMS and Innovation Coffee. I am Enrico Marani and I represent NIMS. Together with me tonight there are Nicolo Monchiero from AITB and Marco Mateazzi and Pietro Tanzini from Innovation Coffee. First of all, thank you again, Julian, for joining us, for accepting our invitation. So, first of all, I'd like to let the audience know something more about you, about your story, your academic background, how did you start your professional career, and what were the key turning points? Thanks, Julian.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Enrico, and good to see you again. My name is Julian Fieres. I'm the head of sales and strategy of division e-mobility within ZF. I'm 31 years old. I'm an economist by trade, but I actually grew up in a car repair shop. So the whole topic of vehicles, of automotive, of technical interplays has always been something that has kept me very interested and very motivated. After finishing my bachelor's degrees, I decided that I'm going to move into the diplomacy career. And I started following that route with a stint in the German embassy in South Africa, where we were doing consulting on economic topics. But I very quickly realized that I would like to flourish in a more dynamic environment than a state office. So I returned from South Africa to Germany, and I entered ZF at the time. This was 2012. And after having a small stint with ZF as a working student between the bachelor's and the master's, I went to the UK for a management master. And then upon finishing that management master, I entered ZF in the management trainee program, where I was rotating through the company 15 months through different locations, also spending 5 months in China in a sales role. And upon returning, I decided that I would like to be in a more, let's say, innovative area within ZF. So I moved into our unit electronic systems, which at the time was developing the first inverter for e-mobility at a time when, let's say, e-mobility was not the easiest market to sell something. And my role here was marketing and business development. So I know how it feels when the demand is only rising for the product slowly. That has changed quickly, though. So in 2016, we set up our division e-mobility, and I was part of that setup team and have taken over the responsibility as the head of strategy for that division ever since. So we were a small division in ZF, starting with around about 900 million in sales. And from 2016 to 2020, we have grown this to almost 2.5 billion. So it was quite an interesting journey. And since the 1st of 2020, besides my role as head of strategy, I also took over the role as head of sales. In my whole career, in the whole journey that I've been going through, the interplay of economic background, but also technical fable and emotion for technology has been something that has coined my career. And also constant change has been something that my career was significantly impressed upon. And that is continuing. So come the 1st of next year, we are merging two divisions, division e-mobility and division car powertrain within ZF, to form a new almost 10 billion, 30,000 employee strong unit that is focusing on the electrification of powertrains. And in this new unit, which we are forming, the 1st of 2021, I'll be running the strategy and transformation department for that merged entity. So again, change has been a constant in my entire career, and I'm actually looking forward to it. Yeah? Whenever change happens, movement happens, and movement is generally something that is electric, and electrification is good. So here we are.
So you were talking about change. It's not only a change, it's a revolution. So I would let Marco continue the interview.
Hi, Julian, and thank you for participating. So since you mentioned about technologies and about the electric revolution, I would like to make you a couple of questions before introducing more in detail about what ZF does about technologies. So we know that have been developed and there are still in development several technologies to replace the traditional fuel engine, for example, the hybrid or the hydrogen. So can you tell us briefly what are the reasons that you believe are the ones that will drive the electric as the standard in the future?
There are several levels to this question, starting from the very highest macro level. Why do we need to electrify our transportation? If you look at a publication called the Oxford Book of Data, World in Data, they're publishing a very nice graphic on the overall greenhouse gas emissions by sector. And when you look at that, you're realizing that around about 30% of the emissions are from the transportation sector, and passenger cars and public transport within that are taking almost half of it. I think simply looking at the sustainable development of our planet, it's something that we have to tackle together as relatively young leaders, because we will have to stay on this planet after all. And if you then direct your search to the WHO, the World Health Organization, and you realize that from the 100 biggest cities on this earth, a lot of them, the air that you're breathing in that is rated unhealthy, I think we have a problem here. So that's why there's a need to act. Yeah, but a need to act doesn't necessarily mean there's a market. And that's the second part of that answer, I would say. How does it happen that there's a market for electrification? The market happens when customers demand something. And this demand can come from a pull where the consumer wants something, they're actively asking for it, or it can come from a push where regulation, incentives, taxation are actually pushing a certain product into the market. Looking, for example, at cigarettes, the price of cigarettes is very, very high because it's a deterrent tax to keep you away from it. The tax for a lot of electric vehicles in some countries is relatively low because you want to actually push that to the market. So the real breakthrough that we are seeing at the moment for electric mobility is a combination of factors from my perspective. It is a significant market push from a legislative perspective with the increased EU targets on greenhouse gas emissions, with China and now North America even following. It is a technology push with a significant price decrease on batteries, allowing actually parity of combustion engines and battery electric vehicles in our forecasts around 2025 and 26. And it's an infrastructure topic. For the first time, we've reached a tipping point where the infrastructure actually allows a larger scale adoption also for people to own such vehicles. To give you an example, yesterday, there was a new law passed in Germany that as a renter of a private flat, you have a legal right to ask your landlord for the installation of a charging pole in your garage. So if you put all of this together, from the need to act on a macro level as a world citizen, to the push from the governments, to the technology enablement and the infrastructure, I think we have a perfect situation where these topics are coming together to create a situation in which the market is actually exploding right now. The demand is surging more rapid, more quickly than we've ever thought before.
What about COVID? So how is this impacting this revolution? The demand, you've seen a decrease in this period or not? What are your takes on this, and how long this will change, will make a change on this increase in demand that you've seen in the past?
So I can tell you as much. I was taking over the role as head of sales at the beginning of the year. And I can tell you the few first months of this year have been relatively hectic, not because we were selling so much, but there was a significant decline that needed to be managed. I think we are already on a very good recovery path. Our shape is definitely a V shape. We are already back on the mend. And in fact, for the next year, our volume forecast is actually exceeding the one we built last year. And if you look at the vehicle registrations during the crisis, what has happened is that the sales of plug-in electric vehicles, so plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles, they have actually remained relatively stable. So if you look at the statistics, it seems that there's a correlation between Corona pandemic, realization how clean our cities and our streets could actually be, the governmental push for a green restart after the Corona crisis, that is creating, again, an increased demand for it. So personally speaking, I think once this pandemic is over, adoption or the readiness will even have increased versus the pre-pandemic time. For everyone who wants to have a very nice example on that, if you Google the NASA pictures from the satellites on greenhouse gas emissions in the big city areas, and you can watch a time-lapse video throughout the pandemic. And if you see that, I think it underlines what I just said.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. Thank you, Julian, again. My topic is ZF, e-mobility, and the ecosystem strategy. So the first question, since ZF is a B2B brand, can you give us a quick introduction to ZF and its products?
That's an interesting one because our product portfolio is definitely not in a nutshell. So let me summarize it as that. Everything that has a complex transmission or complex mechanics, mechatronic systems in it, it's very likely that we are in it. We have a division that is called Division Industrial Technology. Here we are delivering gearboxes, but also mechanical and hydraulic solutions for marine applications, for agricultural construction applications. We are among the world leaders in gearboxes for wind turbines. We are actually very, very active in the market of, let's say, potentially hybrid marine applications. Yeah? We are, with our division truck and bus, very much engaged in all the mechanics and gear sets for trucks and buses. And that includes also the electrification of city buses. So we are a market leader in the electrification of city buses, for example, which is a critical contributor to greener inner cities. Then we have our division Electrified Powertrain, which is the new one I spoke about. Here, all the electronic components that you need for an electric drivetrain are manufactured. The e-motors, the inverters, the reduction gears, the full assembly to a complete e-drive system, but also mild hybrid and plug-in hybrid transmissions, which is the origin of ZF. And then when we speak about mega trends that we are covering, we also have the whole area of safety and autonomous driving or driver assistance systems, units that are focusing on the production of airbags, seat restraint systems, LiDAR, camera, radar, the robotics to actually enable a self-driving car, where we are building a supercomputer, which we call Pro AI, together with NVIDIA. So let me put it that way. From chassis systems to autonomous driving, from e-mobility to industrial technology, we are engaged in the drivetrain as well as in the safety and autonomous steering of these products. There's a nice video. If you check it out on YouTube, it's called ZF at a Glance, and it will show you in a very nice summarized way our key portfolio areas.
So the second point is, can you please elaborate the way in which ZF is contributing to the electric revolution?
In many, many areas. Yeah. So we are the manufacturers of components for electric drive systems, which we sell to third parties. So e-motors, inverters, reduction gears. We in fact enable the electrification for our customers. And we do that in the area of truck, bus, in the area of industrial technology, electrified tractors, electrified construction machinery, but also and predominantly so in the passenger car area. So how do we contribute to that? We contribute to that by offering our customers components, systems, and the systems engineering capability in these three key sectors: industry, technology, truck and bus, and passenger cars, for all solutions in electrification, from mild hybrid to plug-in hybrid to battery electric vehicles. That's actually our value proposition for that electric revolution.
Really insightful. My last question is, how does this so-called ecosystem strategy work? And why did ZF decide to adopt such a strategy instead of some alternative strategies like do-it-yourself or other alternatives?
Yeah, I think when we're speaking about an ecosystem strategy, it's important to clarify the difference between a partnership and an ecosystem. Yeah? So the ecosystem definition is that the partners within an ecosystem, which are necessarily more than two, they actually, in combination of their unique strengths and capabilities, deliver superior customer value than they could by themselves. Okay, that's the very simplified definition of an ecosystem. Superior customer value than if each party does it by themselves. Now, if you are in a market where technological developments are very rapid, where avenues of development are very costly, and where the value chain gets really long, potentially all the way down to semiconductors and even further down to crystal growth or sand, you need to decide where you want to play strategically. And it might very well be that there are areas in the value chain that are key to actually deliver a superior product, but you don't necessarily see them as your core capabilities. that you would like to sit on. So let me give you an example. If you are selling an inverter to a customer, optimal inverter is actually the inverter that is being thought through from the crystal growth for the chips in the inverter to the final inverter that goes into the car. So the complete value chain. And in this value chain, you have ZF as the inverter player. You have a company called like Danfoss, who are playing the module part, the integration of the chips. And you have a chip player like Cree, who are actually semiconductor companies. And now, if you see that, it becomes obvious that by combining these partners, for example, together, you could create superior customer value, and you have very much aligned interests. So to answer your question with this example, we adopted an ecosystem strategy in several areas because we are of the opinion that in a rapidly changing environment, such as e-mobility, partnerships to offer our customers optimal solution very quickly are actually a USP. And just controlling everything is not necessarily a USP in itself if it makes you slower or your value proposition less appealing.
Now it's time for some Q&A, if I'm not wrong.
I had one question regarding, let's say, the general trends. How long do you think it will take for the automotive industry to go fully electric? Because still nowadays it's difficult for most of cars to go, I think, beyond 300 kilometers more or less of autonomy. So how long do you think actually it will take for the industry to go fully electric, meaning that these cars could actually perform long distances without the need of a quick recharge? Thanks.
We can do the maths here together because this is a variable and assumption-based answer. The average time of holding a vehicle in the European Union is 11 years. If you're forecasting that the OEMs will have to meet the revised European Union CO2 emission targets, and if you also factor in that cities like Amsterdam or states like California or now the UK are discussing combustion engine bans in the area of 2035, 2040, and you then add 11 years, I think between the years of 2050 and 2060, we will have reached a very significant penetration of the passenger car market with battery electric vehicles. Probably not 100% because obviously there are regions in the world where simply the infrastructure will not be there. But in the key markets, I would make my bet on somewhere between 2050, 2060.
Very, very interesting. And do you think it will be really costly for, I mean, it is actually because we're seeing consolidation in the industry. I mean, how expensive do you think it is still nowadays? And how long do you think it will take for economies of scales to kick in, especially in the automotive industry, you know, to experience some savings?
So I think where you're pointing at with your question is the combustion engine to battery electric vehicle cost parity.
Definitely.
To say that, I think the key driver of cost parity is the cost of the battery itself. And we're seeing significant entries in the battery market right now in Europe. Companies like Northvolt, for example, who have just entered the sphere and are now building up significant factory capacities of 25 gigawatt hours. We've seen Tesla with their announcement in Grünheide next to Berlin. And if you factor that all together, we come to a forecast where we're saying in 2025, probably we will have hit the hallmark of less than $100 on the kilowatt hour of battery cost. And that means we would see a tipping point where a battery electric vehicle is actually cheaper than a combustion engine vehicle somewhere in the area between 2025 and 2027. And that will obviously further accelerate the advent of fully electric vehicles in the market.
Hi, Julian. Thanks for your insights. Obviously, we see a lot of electrical manufacturers and then really growing now. But what do you predict to be the challenges coming, the pain points? What could potentially slow down the industry in the next few years?
I think there are a few topics that might emerge here. I think one thing is, depending on the degree of acceleration, how much capacity can the supply chain and can the suppliers bear at a given point in time? So right now, the spike in demand that we're seeing is for everybody in the industry already a challenge. We believe that capacities are in fact already limited today. And one key limiting factor will be the battery availability. How quickly can the battery manufacturing be ramped up? We are speaking about significant investments here. That's point number one. And point number two, something that is often overlooked because it is so small, like my fingernail, is the semiconductor supply. So we are forecasting that there will be a significant growth in the segment of 800-volt vehicles, simply for their capability to also speed charge and reach a higher efficiency in certain performance areas. And that requires a very specific semiconductor content. And again, here, the supply chain is not prepared for the significant spike in demand. So do I believe this will have a limiting factor? No, I strongly believe in the power of the market to make things happen if the demand is there, but it will be a stretch. I'm sure of that. Yeah, for the next 5 years, we will see a significant stretch across the entire supply chain, all the way up to the OEMs on these particular topics, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Julian, for joining us. Thanks to all the people that connected tonight with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.